You know, I've been on the internet long enough to remember a time when the only way you can get on the internet for free was to use a floppy disk that your internet service provider would send you physically in the mail. And back then, we couldn't just click on the internet and get immediately online. We had to wait for the ancestral song of our internet router to load, and we had to wish and pray and hope that maybe, just maybe, that third box would load, and we'd be able to finally get on the internet and check if our Neopets are still alive and update our MSN status. And though I obviously didn't heed this warning, I vividly remember the warning that was given to me by my parents and my teachers. What you post on the internet lasts forever, so be careful what you do post on the internet. And I suppose because of that, I have historically tried really hard to separate my digital life from my meat space life, I guess you could say. But you know, the internet has changed a lot since then. And now we all walk around with these supercomputers in our pocket that all have the internet immediately right away. And that has changed so much about how the internet functions, what people post on the internet, and what ends up performing well. And I'll be honest, even as a person who has been blogging for as long as I have, I'm finally sort of hitting this point where there's a lot of technology that I just no longer understand. And I think the first time I really felt that way about an application was when I finally downloaded the app TikTok. Now, as we know, TikTok is an app designed by communist China in order to steal our private information, so naturally, the kids love it. And what the kids love is fascinating to me. I find myself really struggling to follow the trends. And, you know, some of them, when I look into it, I get it, you know, I understand why, you know, the dance that everybody's doing right now, and, you know, I get all of that, why it ends up becoming viral. And, you know, the thing that's kind of cool about TikTok is I see a lot of like normal people grow and become really successful. But I guess I never thought I would see the day when a school shooter would somehow manage to make a TikTok account and amass over 200,000 followers. Meet Jon Romano, a former school shooter who somehow managed to amass a following of hundreds of thousands of people on TikTok. In 2004, when Jon was 16 years old, he took a shotgun to his high school, Columbia High School, and opened fire on students and faculty. Fortunately, no one was killed. Only one teacher was shot in the thigh before he was ultimately taken into custody. He left a letter saying goodbye to his family, and in that letter, he explains why he did what he did, and he mentions that he felt betrayed by the vice principal and the principal of the school. He claims that apparently the principals were speaking behind his back, and he blames them for apparently spending a little longer in a psych ward. Ultimately, he was convicted of attempted murder and reckless endangerment, and he was sentenced to 20 years in jail, but ended up serving just 17. In 2020, when he got out of jail, he started to make content on social media, trying to give insight into his thoughts as a former school shooter. Eventually, he actually started to give presentations at schools about preventing school shootings. On his TikTok page, he would talk a lot about doing charitable work and working with homeless people, even volunteering at homeless shelters. The little subtitle of his TikTok page, I think, said something along the lines of, "I was part of the problem, now I want to be part of the solution." And he clearly presents himself as a mental health advocate who is very aware of his privilege as a white man. But believe it or not, all of the things that I just mentioned up to this point are not the reasons I discovered Jon Romano. I discovered Jon Romano because I saw this video in my feed.
Do you believe that people can be racist against a white person? I do, and so does the man who attacked me with swords. He almost took my life while calling me the white devil. And I'm even going to show you a video clip of him telling police that he did so for racist reasons. Now, let's look at the definition of what racism is. Racism is prejudice or discrimination against somebody or some group because of their racial or ethnic group. Now, it does say typically one that has a minority or marginalized group, but it says typically because oftentimes it's directed towards the minority, but it can be directed towards the majority. And as a straight white male in American society, I get it. I have a lot of privilege. I don't face oppression. I don't have systematic racism towards me. I'm just saying that in this one instance where a man tried to end my life, he didn't know anything about me. We didn't know each other's names. He didn't know about my past. We didn't have some big argument blow up. He was arguing with somebody else, called them the white devil. And then me and some coworkers said, hey, like, you can't be using that term around here. Please just relax. De-escalate the situation. He took an issue with me because my coworkers were black. He didn't care what they were saying. He was upset that I was addressing him. And he would then start calling me the white devil. And after trying to de-escalate it, and after a while, I had to ask him to leave. And then he attacked me while calling me the white devil. So here is him in his own words saying he attacked me for racist reasons.
Can you, well...
The dude said I was saying something racist, so I showed them what racism is.
Yeah, can you just...
Now, because of all of the stuff we talked about at the very beginning of this video, I have a lot of things to say about this particular video from Jon Romano, but I wanted to take you guys through the evolution of my thoughts. When I first saw this video, I was like, okay, yeah, I guess it's plausible that a black person could hate a white person so much that it would encourage them to be violent. And I think it would be really silly to sort of start debating about, whether or not that would be some form of racial prejudice, because for the white person experiencing it, it certainly is, right? This is an example of a person being, violently attacked while being called a white devil. It's very obvious to me why somebody would have that experience and think this person is targeting me because of my race, right? All of that makes sense to me. They are experiencing a form of racial prejudice. This is an example of a person being violent towards them because they are white. At the same time, we have never and don't currently live in a society where it's seen as okay for a black person to be violent towards a white person. Meanwhile, historically, violence from white people to black people has been seen as normal because white people were considered to be of the superior race, whereas black people were considered to be the inferior race. And we have entire structures built up to reinforce that. And that history is going to mean that violence from a white person to a black person and violence from a black person to a white person is going to be responded to very differently. The punishments are going to be different. And interestingly enough, this kind of turned out to be an example of that. In 2022, while Jon Romano was working at a homeless shelter, he was attacked by a black man wielding 2 swords. Ultimately, this man would end up getting 25 years in prison, and when Jon Romano was speaking about the incident, he would really bring home the fact that he doesn't see this guy as entirely evil and that he believes in redemption, especially as a person who is a former school shooter.
Today, Romano faced his attacker and had only grace and well wishes for him.
And forgiveness is not about saying I'm forgetting or that what he did was okay. Forgiveness is about saying I can move forward with my life and let go of the anger.
And that's a conversation worth having. Should we accept that people are not always the crimes that they have committed? I mean, we know this isn't true, but on paper, jail is supposed to be about rehabilitation, and Jon Romano spent 17 years in jail, and he has essentially served his time. Should people like Jon Romano and his attacker, Rendell Mason, always be held accountable for the crimes that they've committed for their entire life? I think that that's an interesting question worth answering. And frankly, I kind of feel like I'm a bit divided on it because in general, I'm not a huge fan of incarceration. I think that we need prison reform and we need it now. But at the same time, I do believe that certain people should be separated from our society. I mean, I am a person who has been harmed and traumatized by quite a few people throughout my life. And there are people who I've been hurt by who I consider to be dangerous and will probably always consider to be dangerous even if they've changed. And what I've always resented about certain aspects of this redemption conversation is that oftentimes we are pressured to have an immense amount of sympathy and consideration for the people who hurt us, who are often far, far, far more powerful than us socially. I mean, this is something I think about a lot because quite often when we've had conversations about redemption on this channel, who are we generally talking about? White men. We're usually talking about white men who have done something really, really messed up, who get the canned excuse of they were mentally ill, they didn't know they were a troubled teen, and da-da-da-da-da. And there's just this endless amount of sympathy and care and patience given for them. And I've learned over time to feel less like I should give that to people. Like, I absolutely do not need to tolerate or stomach racism because apparently a white person needed to be racist in order to understand how they shouldn't be racist, right? Like, there's no part of that that I need to be present for. I don't need to be celebrating the fact that you've changed after you've hurt me, right? After you've already done the thing. And I hate that pressure because it just never allows for people who are marginalized to ever accurately and clearly speak their pain. I've always believed that people can change, but I don't believe that we need to be required to participate or observe that change. And this is going to be a theme for Jon Romano, as we'll get into, but it turns out he didn't really tell the truth about that story.
Y'all, I know y'all probably tired of Jon Romano, but I can't let facts just not be told. Learning that the reason why Jon got attacked is because he caused that man to get kicked out of the homeless shelter and lose his benefits. And the man came to the shelter arguing with Jon about what Jon did. Remember when Jon said, we didn't know each other. He was arguing with someone else. I stepped in. It was all a fucking lie.
For the man who tried to chop me up with swords, April 7th, that's what he'll be sentenced to. I have no problem with that. My only problem is with the fact that they never charged him with a hate crime, despite the fact that he was calling me racial slurs while trying to end my life. What do you think?
It wasn't charged as a hate crime because you were not attacked because you were white, like we said. Like we freaking said. And the police report says that you were antagonizing the man. You caused that man to lose his services, got to arguing with him, knew that he was having mental issues, saw the swords in his hand, and continued to antagonize him, and you got attacked. And then you went to the media and said you were attacked because you were white. And then you get on TikTok and start preaching anti-white racism, knowing damn well that you caused that man to lose his services. And that's why he was mad at you. The audacity of it all. And I swear, Jon's story and like Jon's whole entire profile is white supremacy in a box. The confusion of it all. The lies, the illusion, the manipulation, the shit that don't make no sense. The dangers of it all. He literally had children in his comments before he turned his comments off, telling him and expressing to him how they also daydream about unaliving their classmates. And then he had the fucking audacity to respond to these kids as if he was qualified. They were asking him, how did you deal with the thoughts? How do I deal with the thoughts? You're not qualified to tell them that because you didn't deal with your thoughts. You acted on them. But only white supremacy would think that they had the power to respond to that, even though you know you are not qualified. You have no remorse.
So it turns out things did not exactly go the way he tried to say that they went. And you know, when I found out about this, it put some things together. You've got this white man who committed a school shooting. Granted, nobody died, but he was still a person who was able to walk into a school with a gun and fire off shots, right? Now he's working at a homeless shelter where he has the power to remove impoverished Black people from the only place that they currently have to live. I mean, it sounds a little bit white devilish to me. I'm going to just say that. It sounds a little bit white and it sounds a little bit devilish to me, if I'm being honest with you. Like, the audacity. And that's the thing that I really struggle with. Like I said, I was told to be so careful what I put on the internet and to sort of observe somebody be a school shooter and somehow still have the audacity, the unmitigated gall. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't think the attack was warranted and I don't believe in violence and I don't support violence, but like, I certainly understand now why it happened. And like I said, this is kind of a theme with Jon Romano. Jon Romano changes some of the stories in order to present a certain face, right? And the face is always one that you, of course, have to sympathize with, right? Like when I saw the video, not knowing anything about him, I was like, wow, this guy experienced a hate crime, right? This guy, was white and was attacked because he was white by a vicious black man who just hated that he was white. Like, what a terrible experience for him to have. Now, something to keep in mind about Jon Romano is that he currently lives in and is currently working in the same community where he committed these crimes. And, the more I found out about Jon Romano, the more I was just baffled by his audacity. It's a degree of audacity that I have a really, really hard time understanding. And I think that's really largely because I'm a minority. I am so used to second guessing whether or not I should be certain places or be doing certain things or be seen doing certain things that it blows my mind. Absolutely blows my mind that somebody could commit a school shooting, then move back into the same area where they committed said school shooting and start a social media career where they're getting clout for being a school shooter. That's wow. It's so far outside of the realm of something that I would do. And while Jon may say he's not trying to find sympathy, a lot of his stories have been shifted around in order to make him seem more sympathetic. I mean, the story that he told about the swords was indeed shifted around to make him a more sympathetic character. And that's the thing. He may say on TikTok that he is not interested in sympathy, but all of his stories are told in a way where the viewer would indeed feel sympathy for him.
A lot of people know me for this, surviving a sword attack 7 months ago when I worked at a homeless shelter. But a lot of you might not know my full story and why I wanted to work at that homeless shelter helping people and why I'm such a big advocate for mental health. This is me at 16 years old, about to be sentenced to 20 years in prison. Because on February 9th, 2004, when I was just 16 years old, I did the unthinkable. I walked into my high school with a shotgun. Now, my intentions that day were not what we see too often with these tragedies on the news. I was not there to kill, but to be killed. And I could have stayed at home and ended my own life. And sometimes I still wish I had. But I was afraid. I was unable to pull the trigger on myself. And part of me also didn't want to die alone. I also didn't want to be forgotten. I wanted people to see me. I wanted them to see my suffering. Because I believed that I was alone in my suffering. I didn't know just how prevalent depression is and how too often mental illness is. So yeah, I wanted people to see me. And I also knew that I'd be harming people psychologically. I knew I'd be spreading the suffering that I felt like I had alone. But when I was in that school that day, I was not there to kill anybody.
When he describes his motivation for the shooting, he often says that he was trying to hurt himself in a public way that would potentially traumatize other people, but would never hurt them, right? He argues over and over again that while he brought a gun into school, he did not actually plan on killing anybody other than himself. And as it turns out, there's a lot that seems to indicate that that might not have exactly been the case.
What I did say is that Jon Romano shouldn't have a platform. And the main reason being is he lied about what he did. Here's what Jon said happened on his TikTok page.
Because my name is Jon Romano, and I did 17 years in prison. Because when I was 16 years old, I went into my high school with a shotgun. My intentions that day were not to kill, but to be killed. And when I went in there, I fired 2 rounds into the ceiling above students' heads, and I walked around, waiting for the police to show up and hopefully end my life. Instead, I was grabbed from behind by vice principal, and we struggled for the gun. During the struggle, the gun went off, and a teacher who was coming up behind us was hit in the leg.
Before I made my video on Jon Romano, I did research. Here's what I read. It's the story of Jon Romano, written by William B. Patrick, who was commissioned by the New York State Education Department to write a book-length report on the incident. I read almost the entirety of this book, about 150 pages of the 195. And that's how I figured out that Jon Romano wasn't telling the truth about what he did. This is what he told police after being taken into custody. I've had fantasies for about the last year of going into Columbia and shooting up the place. The fantasies were of me shooting random people. I really hate Mr. Crandall and Mr. Coosdale. They are principals at Columbia. They have no respect for me and lied to me. If I saw them, I would have shot them. In the 4-page note he wrote before going to shoot up his school, he said that the reason he picked Columbia to shoot up is because he blamed Columbia for his extended stay in the psych ward. If John's intention was not to hurt or harm anybody, then why did he bring 25 shotgun shells stuffed in his pockets? This is what John said about him shooting at 2 students. They saw me, I had the gun at waist level, pointing it down at them. They ran, and then I said, oh shit, and that's when I fired 2 quick shots at them. This is what it says about Mike Bennett, the teacher that John shot. The kid with the gun, his eyes had met Mike's eyes just before he pulled the trigger. While the assistant principal was struggling to get the gun from John, he cries for help. Mike, help, help. Mike comes down the hall. John lifts his head, sees Mike. He tried to jack up the gun to shoot him. In the assistant principal's mind, there was no question about what was happening. If he let this kid pull the gun up, Mike was probably dead. His heart dropped and he said, no, please no, as the gun suddenly went off in his hands. No matter what John is saying now, his intentions that day were to harm people. He brought ammunition to harm people. He pointed guns and shot at people. And he jacked up the gun to shoot Mike Bennett. Does this scream reform? Does this scream he should have a platform? I don't think so. I'm not even saying his intentions weren't to die. I'm saying that those weren't his full intentions. Those weren't his actions. That's not what he told people. That's not what he tried to do. Jon Romano went in there to shoot people. He brought ammunition. He shot at people. He shot and hurt somebody. So because Jon Romano did not tell the truth about what happened that day, I don't believe he should have a platform.
So it's pretty clear that he was trying to hurt people. It's fortunate that he didn't. It's very, very fortunate that the only person who was harmed was very minorly harmed with a bullet in their thigh, right? But at the end of the day, Jon Romano isn't really telling the truth about what happened. I think if Jon Romano wanted to harm himself in that way, there were simpler ways to do it. And I don't know why he would need 20 bullets in order to make that happen. And something that really bothers me about all of this is that the one thing we really do know about school shooters is that they often inspire each other. It's really common to see one school shooting happen after the media has discussed another school shooting for a very long time. And from the letter that he sent his family, he actually mentions in it that he was in the middle of watching a documentary about the Columbine shooting.
I was in middle school when Columbine happened, and I remember being terrified afterwards, actually. I don't remember the day it happened. I never watched the news or anything, but I remember the atmosphere kind of changing in the school where suddenly everybody realized like somebody could come in and start shooting. And I was terrified. I remember specifically not wanting to sit near the door of the class because I thought, that's where somebody's most likely going to get shot first. I wanted to sit near a window because I remember thinking, I'm going to jump out this window. And, unfortunately, I became the monster that I was afraid of. But, yeah.
Despite going on TikTok and talking about how the Columbine shooting shook him up at the time, it's very clear reading the letter that he sent his family that he felt inspired by it. And that is why I am so baffled by a TikTok star who is also a school shooter who claims to want to be part of the solution. I don't know if anyone else has had this experience, but something that I have felt internally disappointed by is how easily news of school shootings washes over me. I mean, at a certain point, they were happening so often that it didn't surprise me that there was another one, right? A lot of times when these things happen, they happen in sequence with each other and it becomes kind of overwhelming to the point where I no longer really check in, right? There was a time where there were like 3 back to back and I couldn't keep it all together because there were so many happening at once. I loved school. I absolutely loved school. And I think I would have had a very different experience in school if I had to also be worried about getting shot, right? And it really bothers me that he doesn't seem to understand that regardless of whether or not he might have changed, There are some people who are always going to look at him and see a specter. There are some people who are going to always look at him and see the person who almost murdered them.
If Jon's story is to be believed exactly as he tells it, that he went to school that day with a gun with zero intention of harming another person, then he is an outlier from every school shooter that has come before him and come after him. The value and insights we are supposedly getting into the mind of school shooters from him telling his story doesn't exist, because every school shooter after him had the full intent to kill and maim as many people as possible. And while he spent 17 years in jail, growing and evolving as a person, so did the school shooters. They have left increasingly unhinged manifestos detailing themselves as martyrs with a message or a punishment for society. The ideology behind their actions is misogynistic and racist, and they relish in the idea that their violent acts will be infamous regardless if they are around to see it. Regardless if you believe Jon's side of the story or not, we do not need a school shooter from nearly 2 decades ago giving us insight into the minds of school shooters today. They have done a great job of giving us that themselves. You cannot be not like other school shooters and also claim to have valuable insights into the minds of school shooters in the same breath. Again, if we believe everything that Jon is saying, then the only thing that he has in common with mass shooters and school shooters is that he believes in reverse racism. And there is zero argument to be had about the good his message has outweighing the bad that it does being on this platform. And if Jon truly cared about what happens to people in the aftermath, he would have done more to uplift the voices of survivors instead of just creepily following them silently on TikTok.
There are people who do not want to see you, and they have a very, very valid reason for not wanting to see you.
And then start shooting. And I was terrified.
As the father of a murdered child from a school shooting, I think of you as exactly the monster that you are. You are scum. You will never receive my compassion. You'll never receive my respect. And even though that I wasn't even involved with the school shooting that you initiated and did, you will never get my forgiveness for it. And I don't feel sorry for anything that you have faced since then. You deserve it and more. And you're on TikTok chasing clout. It's pitiful. It's also pitiful the people that follow you and boost your ego by telling you that, oh, it's okay, you've changed your life. The man that attacked you got 25 years. You started shooting in a school and you only did 17. You both should be locked away for life. And it's infuriating. It's infuriating that I can't say the things that I want to say because I've already made this video and it got blocked. And I know that you follow me. See, I saw it when I went to go and look at your profile after I'd already seen a couple of your videos. It's very, very selfish of you to do the things that you are doing. You disrupted everybody's life and you want to blame it on mental health. Yeah, mental health is a big, big issue in the United States. But the thing is that you're not the only one that had a fucked up childhood. And a lot of these people ain't shooting up schools. You're not the only one that wanted to be seen. Everybody does. But you made it about you. And you want to talk about how you didn't want to hurt anybody, except you shot at people. So make it make sense. You said you went to the school to die. Why bring anybody else into it? Why shoot at other people? Now these people are scarred for life. And you want to talk about how, in Columbine, when Columbine happened, you were terrified. And then you turned around and became that monster. So no. I think what would be best for all of society is for you to do a little soul searching, realize that you are not fit to be out. Anybody that shoots up a school is not fit to ever return to society, and that all you are doing is clout chasing.
I respect and can celebrate that Jon Romano wants to be seen as somebody different than the teenager that he was. When you grow up, you especially start to see how silly it is to think that these little things are such a big deal, right? But I think that Jon Romano needs to accept that to many people, he will always be a specter. To many people, he will always be the scary person that they think of when they go to sleep, the person that they never want to see again, because that's the person that shot at them. That's the person who could have almost ended their life. For a lot of people, their lives were forever changed that day. And trauma is something that we don't really control, right? We can't really control trauma because it imprints on us. And so, as much as I understand Jon Romano wants to be seen differently or wants to not be held to his crimes that he committed when he was a teenager, I think that if he was really doing this work, he would at bare minimum understand that some people don't want to see him. And that feeling alone would be enough to encourage him not to start a TikTok page. It would be enough to encourage him not to be seen and known as the school shooter dude who has been reformed, because who the fuck cares? Your reformation is not important to the people who were directly impacted by what you did.
The caption in my bio says dead kids can't read. If you are unfamiliar with me, I am an early childhood educator and a parent who went from teaching in public school to teaching privately because of gun violence. I could not continue to go to work every day and feel scared that I was going to die. The first time I ever had to tell a group of kindergartners about a lockdown drill changed me. Have you ever looked into the eyes of 27 5-year-olds and told them that they would be okay when you're pretty sure that they wouldn't be? Have you ever thought about using your body as a human shield to protect babies? I drop my 3rd grader off at school every day, and I pray over her that she will make it home from school. That's the reality of living in the United States. And you, sir, are one of the OG school shooters. The only reason you are out walking around as a free man is because no one died. And thank God no one died. But you ruined people's lives that day. There are people who are never going to feel safe again because of you. You say that you want to be part of the solution. Speak privately with psychologists and school counselors so they know what to look for, but you should not have a platform. And no one should be supporting this man's platform.
It's perfectly clear to me that he hasn't really in any meaningful way dealt with what he's done, because he has this constant need to paint himself in a way where he is always the sympathetic character. He shot up a school, but he was suicidal and was going through a lot at the time. As a white dude, he was willing to give his time to work at a homeless shelter, and in return, he was attacked by a racist black man who wanted to end his life because he was white. And now, in this context, he's served his time for his crime. He contributes to society and is a charitable person, but people still won't forgive him or tolerate him for the crime that he committed decades ago. We can ask the question of whether or not Jon Romano deserves to have a platform. But for me, the bottom line of it is this. There are people who have a very, 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 very good reason to not want to share space or community with a school shooter. And what we know is that when we idolize school shooters, it encourages people to romanticize the crime and want to carry it out themselves. Purely from what I have seen of Jon Romano, I don't think that he is the right person to be having these conversations. I am sure that he cares about certain aspects of this conversation, but it's really clear to me that he hasn't done the work and that him being in the public eye is more destructive than it is productive. I think that Jon Romano is allowed the space to change, but that he should probably do it outside of the public eye. Imagine if, for example, he just worked at a homeless shelter without posting TikTok videos about it, right? Like, you can do that still, just so you know. You don't have to make content about working at a homeless shelter. You can just do it. Like I said, we know that school shooters are inspired by each other, but what they're often inspired by is the amount of popularity and fame that the gruesome crime brings them, right? And so Jon Romano wanting to be known, Jon Romano wanting to have a large TikTok following, to me just smells like more of that. Through all of this, Jon Romano still maintains a front-facing public TikTok page that has 274,000 followers. And the thing that all of this makes very clear to me is that while Jon Romano probably has changed quite a bit, he is still that teenager, that sad teenager, desperate for attention. Pretty clear to me that the crime he committed is basically his brand, right? Like, this is basically the thing that will bring him money. This is probably the only way he actively makes money, is by talking about this crime. So I guess I sort of understand why he leans into it so much. It's just, I think somebody who would have done the work would have realized that some people just do not want to see you and have a really, 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 really good reason to not want to see you. We don't need to see you in order for you to change. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about this because it was one of the more bizarre things that I've seen on the internet. I mean, the last time we talked about a bizarre thing I saw on the internet, it was the woman who was selling the autopsy photos of a young murdered boy. Very bizarre, still quite bizarre. Check out my video about that. But yeah, I really just hope that we as a society don't get too desensitized to this stuff. And that's, I think, the thing that I just keep getting concerned by, because again, shooting up a school, spending time in jail and then getting out of jail and immediately wanting to be a known commodity is just a level of audacity that I don't personally know. I don't personally know that audacity, that degree of audacity. But anyways, I just really wanted to talk about this because it was just so baffling to me. I think the last time we saw something like this, it was the woman who was trying to sell photos of a boy's autopsy. Jesus Christ, that was cringy to me, and it still baffles me to this day. Feel free to click over here and see that particular video. But I just really want to know what you guys think about this situation. Should we accept that school shooters change, right? What is the line for you? Are there certain crimes that you would be more willing to forgive than others? Or is something like a school shooting just completely unforgivable forever? I would love to know what you guys have to say about this. So anyway, on that note, I will talk to you guys later. And I want you to always remember and to never forget that you are beautiful and you are loved. Bye.